like Zoomer Historian. I like his base tweets. I like his Twitter. And I actually don't know much about Queen Elizabeth myself. I mean, I know like the basic stuff, right? She was really fucking old. Everybody loved her. She's a huge part of British culture. But like, she basically made the crown super fucking weak by not doing anything and handed over complete power over to the parliament. But everybody loves her because of that. But like, she's actually horrible. I want to watch this and watch and learn.
Many will be familiar with what we would term slop accounts, who post generic watered down, pro-British, pro-Israel, anti-Islamic, and civic nationalist type posts, often utilizing AI. The owners of such accounts are often not even British, very often they tend to be Indian. Recently, one of the more egregious examples of these accounts, going by the name of God Save Great Britain, posted a picture of the late Queen Elizabeth II with the following caption: "This extraordinary woman carried out her duty until her very last breath, because she knew Charles couldn't. She was right." End quote. There was plenty of pushback against this post from people like myself, but at the time of writing, the post has 58,000 likes and over 7,000 retweets. And
Okay, I'm gonna out myself as a tourist real quick. So, like, I follow Zoomer Historian Twitter, and he's like one of my favorite accounts because he's like literally me with a bunch of things, except he just tweets a lot more. I love how aggressive and angry he is. This is my first time actually really watching one of his videos, though, and his voice is so, like, nice and kind of, I don't want to say sweet, but like, I don't know. I'm so used to him being so like brash and angry and just and so rude and badass on Twitter that hearing his voice and it's just so like calming and nice to listen to. And like the accent is great. And I'm just like, it's just not how I imagined his voice to be. I'm kind of confused. Fucking poser, exactly. Exactly. So no flicking Amal. I'm not flicking. Okay? I'm not. He's got like a wife and a kid. I ain't doing that shit. Okay? No, I just appreciate a good British accent. That's all.
at first glance, most Brits would instinctively agree with the tweet. The image surrounding the late Queen was seemingly immaculate. To most people alive today, she was always a little delicate old lady, and a quiet one at that. She had mastered the art of decorum. She acted exactly like a monarch, or, at least, a monarch in the modern British sense, that is, a figurehead. She was a blast from the past, a relic from a bygone age, and, as time went on, she essentially became all we had left from our great past. When she died, it hit almost everyone to the core, regardless of their political views, and even I was left momentarily saddened. It truly felt as if our great past had finally been buried. There is a reason our people queued up in their thousands to go and say their final goodbyes. In life and in death, she was adored almost unanimously throughout the nation. Now that the dust has settled, though, it's worth taking a second look. Sure, on the surface, she seemed like the perfect, respectable queen that she was presented as, but was that really the case if you peer under the surface? Did the mask ever slip? What was her agenda? The mask most certainly did slip, and in many cases, in quite an egregious fashion. Queen Elizabeth was not one of our greatest monarchs as she is presented. She is, in fact, perhaps the very worst. She presided over the destruction of everything which had taken us centuries to build. She cheered on and actively supported the genocide of her own people, the British people, abroad. At home, she was equally as terrible to her people and cheered on their ethnic replacement. The church that she was the head of was also completely decimated and has now become a complete irrelevance. Nowadays, she is often compared to her son, Charles, who, as king, has been immeasurably worse, at least when it comes to prudence. He isn't trying to hide it. He just comes right out and sucks up to the invaders, and effectively sticks the middle finger up at the British people. His mother had far more tact than that, and quite naturally, he is seen as far worse. But how great can a queen really be?
Man, I know like women age like milk, and that's one of the things that terrifies me because I am a local vagina holder, obviously. But like seeing these people that I've seen this like old their entire lives, like Queen Elizabeth, and I get to see old pictures or and videos of them when they were like my age and younger or around and stuff like that, and how pretty she is. I know this whole thing is like the basher, which I'm down for, but like I'm also like, damn, she's gorgeous. And then I see the picture of her when she's old, and I'm just like, ah, fuck. That's just kind of sad. Like, I know it's just natural biology. There's really nothing you can do about it. And there are ways to help, try to like eat healthy, work out, etc., etc. So you can still look decent when you get to your 40s and 50s, and then kind of after that, then no matter what you do, you're still gonna get fucked by old age. But like, it's still just like sad to see such beauty like this go away, even if she was a bitch. It's just one of those things that really like it's always in my mind as a woman. That's why I like to say that women age like milk and men like wine so much, because it's a painful reminder to myself of what's in my future, and which is okay, right? It happens naturally. I'm not gonna get Botox and plastic surgery like we were talking about earlier, and try to prevent that from happening. But it's also like okay, clock's a ticking, clock's a ticking. Menopause be hitting hard, unfortunately. That kind of deal. But I'm just talking about it in general, right? I'm bringing this up because she is so pretty, and I'm so used to seeing her look so old her entire life. But like you see, I don't know, like those women out there who have kids and they blow up, and they're in their 30s, and they just like I know they're land wills, and they would probably look better if they lost weight. But you see like examples of it all the time of women in their 40s, just it's the beauty less fleeting, and that's normal. That's okay, which is why it's so important for women just to actually develop a real personality at the end of the day, right? Actual utility beyond just their tits and their ass. And that's what a lot of modern women don't realize, actually. But at the same time, it's still sad nonetheless, you know?
Who oversaw the collapse of our world-spanning empire. How great can a queen be who inherited an almost entirely homogenous Great Britain, a Britain peopled by her people, the British, and then leave behind a Britain in which only around 70% of the population were British? These are the people she was meant to protect. Any other monarch in history has been, or would have been, condemned for all time had the same or similar things happened during their reign. King John saw us lose our French territories and is remembered as our worst ever king, and sat back as large swathes of our own country were colonized by third world foreigners. Her British subjects
Oh,
in those regions were then subjected to untold horrors such as the rape gangs, in which hundreds of thousands of our little girls were tortured or even murdered by mostly Pakistani men. Not once did she lift a finger. Does this all not make her immeasurably worse than King John? Let's take a real look at Queen Elizabeth. This is by no means a deep dive on her entire life or all of her evil deeds, but this, I hope,
you
at
got
least serves as a
tits.
partial eye-opener so that people will think again about Her Majesty. A couple things before we begin. Firstly, this video is in no way, shape, or form political and is purely a work of history. Please do not overthink it and turn it into something it is not. Thank you. Secondly, a huge thank you to those of you who have signed up as a member here on YouTube, on Subscribestar, or, best of all, over on Ko-fi. Without your kind subscriptions, or one-time Ko-fi donations, these videos would quite simply not be possible, and I wouldn't be able to do this for a living. I really cannot thank you enough. Even the lowest tier helps immeasurably. Thank you. When Queen Elizabeth came to the
Exactly. All donos and tips and saludos are greatly appreciated.
throne in 1952, she inherited a very different Britain to the one her father had in 1936. Britain had been bankrupted by World War II, and the will to empire was almost completely gone. Worst of all, American pressure to decolonize was ever increasing. India had already gone. We had pulled out of Palestine, and the rest of our empire was looking to follow in those footsteps. It all just seemed inevitable. Trying to cling onto this empire at this stage, for most governments, would have been futile. It was a
Ooh. Okay, now my interest is peaking. So I'm assuming this is when they left. Wait, 22 was Gavin Togo? Wait, the British Empire still had a country in 2022? Fascinating, actually. I love this stuff. I love history. I need to read more history. Okay, I know it's gonna sound really, like, weird and contradictory. I used to be such a big history nerd back in, like, in high school, and we used to know a lot of things. And basically, like, all my knowledge has been wiped from my mind because I just haven't utilized it. I haven't refreshed it. And so, like, I know things, or at least I used to know things. So I guess maybe I don't know things anymore. I still find this shit fascinating. Really sad. It's still fascinating here.
tough pill to swallow, but that was simply the reality of the situation. Queen Elizabeth's response was to throw her weight behind the Commonwealth project instead of just pulling out. The Commonwealth, essentially, is meant to be an association of independent states consisting of countries which is formed out of the British Empire. Initially, before the war, the Commonwealth was by any definition simply the white settler colonies of the British Empire, which had found their own feet to such a degree that they were now basically independent, but would still be part of the British Empire in name. They were bound by ethnicity, and this definition made perfect sense. Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and South Africa had all been settled by the English, the Scottish, the Welsh, and the Irish. In the Balfour Declaration of 1926, at that year's Imperial Conference, the United Kingdom and her dominions agreed that they were, quote, autonomous communities within the British Empire, equal in status, in no way subordinate one to another in any respect of their domestic or external affairs, though united by a common allegiance to the Crown and freely associated as members of the British Commonwealth of Nations, end quote. Allegiance to the Crown was merely a polite way of putting it. The Commonwealth was explicitly racial. India had not been granted her independence, quite simply because they were not white. The British Empire was the global expansion of the British people. Anyone living within it before the year 1945 would have understood this. Queen Elizabeth, however, was embarking on quite a different venture and was throwing herself into uncharted waters. Instead of just dissolving the empire and letting these countries all get on with their own affairs, she insisted on just making every single territory of the British Empire part of the Commonwealth. This was not entirely her own doing, but she followed in the footsteps of her father to the extreme. In the 1949 London Declaration, the term British was removed from the term British Commonwealth of Nations, a sign of changing times, indeed. In her 1953 Christmas broadcast, Her Majesty described her new, multiracial Commonwealth. Quote, the Commonwealth bears no resemblance to the empires of the past. It is an entirely new conception, built on the highest qualities of the spirit of man, friendship, loyalty, and the desire for freedom and peace, end quote. This was quite a change from the British-only.
See, that sounds really nice on like paper because liberalism, equality, all men are equal, etc., etc., peace and love, hippie bullshit. But like, let's see, 75 years later, we know that's not true in any way, shape, or form. Fuck, we knew it wasn't true back then, but we were trying this stupid experiment. And I just hearing that, like, still a one part of me still like wants to appreciate it because the peace part and happiness. But it's just like it should just be for the British. It is the British who went in, colonized, and settled these places and built them up from nothing into something. Because the people who were originally living there didn't do fucking shit with them, and they lost that territory. It's now granted independent nations like Australia and Canada, so it's still just Australia and Canada, but it's still British descendants who did this. And to just throw that out the window for this new racial mixed bag is really upsetting. Like, you're killing yourself for this ideal that's impossible to reach.
Of 1926, in which every country had zero conflicting interests, as they were, after all, the same people, just on different land masses. In World War II, all of the dominions would rush to our aid and fight side by side with us. And why would they not? It was the most natural thing in the world. It is the same as defending your very own family members if they came into conflict with someone. Who would stand by and do nothing in such a situation, regardless of the rights or wrongs? By contrast, the Commonwealth had.
Yeah, because like, okay, maybe I have I know what, fuck, I don't think I really had the wrong mentality with this. Like, obviously, the Aussies are their own country with their own people and their own culture, but they're still cousins to the British. Same with the Canadians, still cousins to the British. Essentially, they're their own nation, own people, with own thing. But they're still family members. They're still related. There's still that sense of belonging and warm thoughts. And I know America has basically completely cut that off because we were the devil child, essentially. I still wish we have that sentiment here in America, and we used to actually have that too before. There used to be this common understanding and brotherly love amongst countries, even if they were independent and had their own thing going on, right? Canadians are notorious for their maple syrup and their leaves and their niceness and constantly saying sorry and all that fun stuff. They're just waiting for a chance to commit war crimes that aren't invented yet. Yes.
Never lifted a finger to help us. Quite the opposite. They have been the albatross around our necks ever since. In 1960,
Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna fangirl for a minute. I almost never hear the phrase albatross around your neck. I never hear that term ever used. That phrase. I love hearing it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love the reference. Okay.
in Ghana, the Queen doubled down. Quote, the Commonwealth is not a thing of the past. It is not tied to the British Empire. It is a completely new conception built on voluntary association, end quote. Quite simply, the Commonwealth now existed purely for royal ego. On paper, the British royal family were now the monarchs of the Commonwealth nations. In reality, this meant nothing at all. Britain had lost all benefits of empire, but the crown wanted to keep the title. In reality, these ties would create nothing but trouble, and even genocide against British populations. Every single African nation which was given independence immediately collapsed into anarchy and dictatorship. Massive ethnic violence was commonplace. When they weren't massacring each other, however, they would turn on the white man. The aggressor would then suddenly become the downtrodden innocent victim. All of these third world states would band together each year at the Commonwealth Prime Minister's Conference and push the most anti-white line possible. If their demands were not met, then they would simply threaten to pull out of the Commonwealth, and even in some cases, boycott Britain. There's so much.
My God, I guess she's a woman, and like I know Europe in general, but I know Britain in general has also had, let's say many, but a few more female rulers than normal. But like once again, all I'm hearing is more cases that women shouldn't be anywhere near power and leadership. Cause like you basically sentenced your people to die. Okay, yeah, they might be their own independent countries in their own way, but they're still, relatedly your people. You still protected them, especially in the case of South Africa in Rhodesia, and just by abandoning them like that, you literally sentence them to die, and all for the name of racial equality too. Like I know it's in the past now, so there's nothing we can do about it. Even though I'm American myself, I'm still a Europhile, right? Especially an Anglophile specifically, and it's just like to do that to your people, or I once again your cousins, however you want to see it. Basically, they're still you still abandoned them to die. Queen Victoria was right. Women don't belong in politics. True, they don't. They fucking don't. Get them out. Including me, by the way. They had a few base female rulers, but most of them are not. Boudica was one of the base. Base and women do not go hand in hand, right? It's a fun little meme and all, but by default, women can't be base. They have ovaries, and that makes them do dumb fucking shit.
For these wholesome Commonwealth of Nations, united in shared values and built upon the highest qualities of the spirit of man, as she put it. This was the absolute scum of the earth, literal dictators who had slaughtered millions, banding together to tear down the white man. These demands the Queen and the British government conceded to willingly. Rhodesia is by far the best example. Joshua Nkomo, a literal terrorist dissident before Rhodesian independence, was welcomed to Britain with open arms as a Commonwealth migrant and showered in taxpayer money so that he could plan his terrorist acts from the UK.
Commonwealth migrant. I'm now seeing why the British government, not the people, there's a difference. The British government is so open of migrants after decades of this, despite, how much Muslims love to rape and murder and Africans and Indians steal and etc. etc. But once they hit the British soil, they didn't do nothing. They're good little boys, would do no harm.
His children were educated in England at taxpayer expense as he lived it up with a car and other luxuries, and was able to mix with Labour MPs and other high-level members of the British establishment. When Nkomo finally returned to Rhodesia, he was 50 pounds heavier, fattened up by the British taxpayer. Rhodesia was, of course, demanding to remain the way it was. There was no colour bar, but suffrage was decided by easily attainable monetary and literacy requirements. The latter was as simple as literally just signing your own name. In reality, this was
No fucking way. Just if you can sign your own name as a literacy requirement, and the vast majority of Black South Africans couldn't even do that. And I know they were given handouts and helps from the British Empire back then because they did that shit. They still oppressed some and were rulers, which is based, but they still helped try to teach them, especially the Catholic missionaries, were I guess, Protestant missionaries in this case, because we're talking about England in this one in particular. But there was a common factor within all colonies to try to teach the savage in a lot of ways. And they can't even write their own name.
resulted in the white minority ruling the country, but evidently this was working, as Rhodesia was extremely prosperous and had perhaps the lowest crime rate on the entire planet. Britain, at the behest of the Commonwealth, demanded nothing less than national suicide. Every man should be given the right to vote, they said. And just a few decades beforehand, Britain would have considered these new voters to be violent savages who would take centuries to turn into functional, civilized human beings. Yet here they
Which is true, by the way. It takes more than centuries to turn them into civilized human beings, and they haven't evolved as much as they did in the first place.
were demanding they be put into power at the behest of the screeching Commonwealth horde. Prime Minister of Rhodesia Ian Smith wrote of his meeting with Duncan Sandys, Secretary of State for the Colonies and son-in-law of Winston Churchill. Quote, We talked at length, and although his demeanor was more congenial than on the previous occasion, the final result gave me no cause for joy. He repeated and elaborated on the message which I had been given by Alec Home, stressed the danger of disrupting the Commonwealth, and told me that there would even be opposition from some left-wing Conservative MP to the agreement for which we were asking. End quote. Even Conservative MPs could not be moved. Anything which benefited white people would disrupt the Commonwealth. The head of the Commonwealth was, of course, the late Queen. In February 1964, Sir Humphrey Gibbs, the governor of Rhodesia, gave a speech at the opening of Parliament. The governor is, of course, the Queen's representative in a given territory.
Anything that benefits whites was rejected. This was in the fucking 50s, 60s. You know, I saw a post today on Twitter about how anti-racial bias was an American export and that Brits need to reject that. And I actually agreed with that because I do know, like, when it comes to modern day stuff, DEI, Black Lives Matter, those are all American exports into Britain and Europe in general where they don't belong because the whole black on cop, violence type of deal doesn't really happen anywhere in that shape extreme as it does here in America for reasons, obviously, with it. And so, like, I agree with that. But after thinking about it, and now listening to this as well, I did realize, I guess remembered, but realize, I guess, that really the anti-racial bias is, I don't want to say it's a British thing either, because we, in America, we did outlaw slavery, and then we had the whole Reconstruction period. It really kind of seems like it's not. But then there's also this happening too with the Queen, where they just sacrifice the people just to die because it would benefit whites. But with America being ethnically European descendants, I don't really want to blame the British because that kind of feels harsh. And I'm too much of a Anglophile to do that. But at the same time, it really seems just to be it. I guess I'll just put the blame on liberalism then, which liberalism is a British export in itself, right? Like, it is development from Europe and the Enlightenment, and then proceeding forward with the founding fathers, and then going forward from there. If you're human, you deserve the right to freedom. And then obviously, then what's of course the limit to freedom in itself. So it's really not it's fully American blame. Maybe I'm too biased here, but I also don't really want to blame the British either, because if you kind of look at the timeline of things, it really kind of seems like it's all kind of happening roughly around the same time, all things considered. This push to be this egalitarianism, this equality, this blank slate from both sides of the ocean, essentially. And I think that's more liberal thought process, liberalism as a philosophy than really any one country faults. I'm kind of thinking out loud here, so I might have some things incorrect as per usual, but that's my observation so far. The Civil War led to a cultural tetherball match that ended with the North trying to humiliate the South through radical racial policies. The civil rights movement was done mistakenly out of altruism. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, after all, so there are many different factors, Amal. Well, that's also fair. There's always more than one factor at the end of the day, but there's also usually at least one major factor or a couple major factors just in general here.
It is now plain that the British government are not prepared to be brought to any conclusion on the question of independence, except on the most extravagant terms, not because of misgivings about my government's competence and ability to govern in the interest of the country, or the logic or rightness of my minister's case, but because they wish to placate at all costs members of the Commonwealth who have declared openly their hostility to my government and my country. End quote. Her Majesty responded to these complaints by banning Rhodesian prime ministers from the Commonwealth Prime Ministers' conferences. Her own flesh and blood was being thrown out in the cold to placate the seething masses of Africa. Smith expressed his resentment publicly.
I hate women!
Quote, "We are not excluded because we are no longer loyal to the crown or to the ideals on which the Commonwealth was founded. We are excluded because the Commonwealth has outgrown itself, and there is no longer room for us among the motley of small countries which have recently been granted independence and admitted to the Commonwealth without regard to their adherence to the ideals and concept on which it was founded. I wonder if we are really wanted in the Commonwealth any longer, and if we can serve any purpose by remaining." End quote. Before independence, Smith met with Salazar, the ruler of Portugal. He writes of their meeting, quote, "He expressed his special concern for southern Rhodesia, assuring me that Portugal would continue with its proven policy of evolution in Mozambique and Angola, bringing local people into positions of authority as and when they proved themselves. But it was clear that Britain was coming more and more under the influence of the black members of the Commonwealth, and it was obvious to any logical observer that these countries were being manipulated as tools by the Russians. He was particularly distressed that the British were going along with this, not because they were unaware of what was taking place, but because of Britain's policy of appeasing the Organization of African Unity. His sources confirmed this, and he was pleased at the opportunity to pass it on to me." End quote. Rhodesia was left with no choice but to declare independence. To remain would have meant genocide at the hands of a black government, as later happened anyway. The Queen personally intervened during negotiations and completely threw her weight behind Harold Wilson, the Labour Prime Minister, intent on making Rhodesia commit suicide. The British had even cheekily inserted a clause during negotiations which stated that all Rhodesian laws must be approved by the Queen. This was a Trojan horse. As Peter Joyce writes in Anatomy of a Rebel,
So, Rhodesia wants to leave the Commonwealth completely. So, basically, if maybe I'm misunderstanding this. So, Rhodesia wants to leave the Commonwealth completely because the Queen is killing it. Even though Rhodesia is technically its own sort of separate country because that's what the Commonwealth really was. It wants to leave it completely so they don't have to even worry about the Queen. And yet they still want to sneak in a law saying that Rhodesia has to listen to what the Queen has to say, even though they're leaving the Commonwealth. Even though she's massacring her own people, that she doesn't consider her own people because the Commonwealth is everyone, not just the whites. Am I understanding this correctly? I keep on saying I hate women because it's a woman doing this, and I do think that's a large part of it because it is suicidal empathy and it's typical woman things, and they're easily influenced by this. But based on the other factors that are happening during this time period, I do think probably a man would have done the same thing, so I do want to clarify that. I'm just gonna continue hating women because fuck women. I can't even really put my words into a formidable sentence about how evil that is. I wouldn't say retarded because how dumb it is, but no, it's done on purpose, right? This is not stupidity that's happening here. Pure, oh, it's malicious. It's malicious at the end of the day. They wanted these people to die. There's no other way to explain this. They just straight up wanted just Rhodesia to die. They didn't really care how. I'm not even Rhodesian myself. I'm not even British myself, and this fills me with so much anger as the story goes on and on and on. Like I have learned about like Rhodesia being abandoned by the Queen, sacrificed, slain, by the blacks there, and etc. etc. Like I do know the general base story of Rhodesia, but getting into more of these details like this just to see how they were quite literally not even left to die, straight up just murdered.
for Queen, of course, read British government, end quote. The Rhodesians at one point, utterly desperate, sent a letter to the Queen, begging their sovereign to help them out of their current situation and to see sense. Her response was essentially a veiled threat demanding that they act constitutionally, that is, commit suicide. It was pointless of them to even try. The blacks of Rhodesia had already begun their attempt at white genocide, and the Queen had staunchly sided with them. Right from the very first attack, in fact, the Queen had chosen her side. In 1964, Piet Oberholzer was driving with his family in Rhodesia's southeast when suddenly he came to a makeshift checkpoint. Piet told his wife to stay in the car and hide their young daughter under the seat. He then cautiously approached the checkpoint and began to try to talk to the Africans blocking the road. As he did so, more Africans approached his car and began pouring gasoline all over his family. Piet immediately rushed to defend his family when suddenly a knife plunged into his chest. Heroically, however, he was able to fend off the savages and rushed inside of the vehicle. With his dying breath, he drove away and got his children to safety before the bumbling attackers could set the gasoline alight. He then fell dead, and thankfully, his wife and child were rescued. At the scene of the crime, the attackers left a bunch of messages written on lined paper torn from a school exercise book. They were all threats of white genocide. One read, quote, "Crocodile gang will soon kill all whites. Beware," end quote. These scumbags were promptly caught by the Rhodesian security forces, and quite rightly, sentenced to death. This was where Her Majesty chose to directly intervene, and demanded that the murderers be spared. The Rhodesians had, by now,
I was wondering how the story was going to get worse. I was waiting to say something because I'm like, this is going to get worse, isn't it? It got fucking worse. I don't know if I'm supposed to blame this on the fact that she's a woman or liberalism or what. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to blame on. Whatever gets your worms in your brain to function and shit out the crazy fucking idea that these people would set this trap on purpose and try to kill people and leave messages talking about white genocide, and you want to spare them? You want to let them live? That you actually sanction what they're doing? Like, listen, chat, listen. I might lose my racism card for this, but jokes aside about the three-letter acronym that I can't actually say, I don't actually want to commit mass genocide. I just want my country to be for my people, which are white Americans. That's what I want. I want Britain to be for the British. I want France to be for the French, right? I don't want actual mass genocide going here. I just want the respective countries for the respective fucking people. Okay, maybe I'm too nice. Maybe I'll lose my racism card for this. But that's generally was what I believe, because murder is bad. But if you actually target people like this and commit and actually call for genocide and try to kill people and kill this father like this, you're gonna get the death penalty. And the fact that the queen would step in like this and protect these fucking savages, like literally, they try to step away from the Commonwealth. They try to step away from the Commonwealth because the queens are in the fucking bus. They basically were already an independent country anyways, and she still has the audacity to do this. I know this still happens today in America. Obviously, it's still happening in Europe in general with the fucking Pakistani rape gangs and the mass immigration. Like, this has been an attack upon white people for almost 100 years at this fucking point. I mean, it's 2025, okay? World War One ended, and World War Two is about to fucking start about 100 years ago now. And it's been mass genocide of white people for decades now here, almost 100 years. I am tired of this. I am tired of this, and I hate every single person that has allowed this to happen and still allows it to happen to this day. And hearing the stories like this makes me want to Fed post beyond all fucking belief right now. But no, we had to vote our way out of this after all. I can't believe this. I can't. Oh my fucking god, I'm gonna lose my goddamn mind. Look how much we have fallen in less than 100 years, and we still expect this to go on longer? We still expect this to go on longer, being genocided in real time?
Had quite enough of our antics, and had already declared independence.
Mm.
There was no question in listening to
Blacks hate us because we've gone through all the struggles they have and more and come out on top. That's why they get so hostile when you say the whites were slaves too. Yeah.
her loyalty was by now very clear, and the criminals were put to death. Elizabeth, of course, had no qualms about helping terrorists. She would later meet with genocidal maniacs such as Robert Mugabe and Nelson Mandela with no qualms at all. Smith wrote of the moment when he sat down, right before making his final decision to break with Britain. Quote, I slumped back in my chair for a few minutes to contemplate the situation. I was overwhelmed by a feeling of absolute frustration. There was, within my whole system, a very strong desire to preserve my links with the history and tradition and culture that I've been brought up to respect and believe in. But over the last half-decade, this has taken a tremendous battering. When one looked at the composition of the current Commonwealth, the whole character of it had changed. Within Britain itself, we were landed with a socialist government, hell-bent on appeasing the cult of Marxism-Leninism, at the expense of the old traditional values of the British Empire. This was
This dude was hella based. He's dead by now, I know that. But fuck yeah, this dude was amazing.
never part of my tradition and culture. But most important, and above all else, was the treatment to which we had been subjected, the breaches of agreements, the double standards, the blatant deception and blackmail with which we were confronted. To put it crudely, we had had an absolute bellyful. Rhodesians simply wished to be left to lead their own lives. End quote. To the Rhodesians, it was almost incomprehensible, and it was all about to get much worse. Throughout the entire conflict, Her Majesty harboured terrorists and allowed Britain to actively supply the terrorists on the ground. At the Commonwealth Conference of 1965, the Africans demanded that Great Britain smother Rhodesia in sanctions, and Rhodesia
Why? I know why, once again. Chat, I do know why, obviously. This is a case for the anti-racist liberal experiment. How can you just see terrorists killing people, threatening people, burning shit down, and still side with them? And much less happening to your own people, led by your. He said he was a son-in-law to Winston Churchill. So like, still somewhat related to you in some way, shape, or form. It just blows my fucking mind. Like, I know why. I know how. It is the Marxist liberal mentality that he's bringing up here. But it just my brain still can't compute. The sanctions are what doomed Russia, Rhodesia. They would have won against the blacks militarily if it not been for that. Makes sense. If you have no economy and no supplies, then you just can't do anything. They do notice it. That's the problem. They can't speak out about it. Oh, I know that. We gotta vote our way out of it. Gotta vote our way out of it. Gotta, we gotta, we gotta vote our way out of
Asia, the
it.
nation with the world's lowest crime rate, was declared a threat to world peace. The Third World dictators also demanded that Britain actively invade Rhodesia, but this, of course, was where Britain had to draw the line. After checking with the armed forces and reading the public mood, it rapidly became very clear that the British people would never tolerate directly attacking their own kith and kin, their own family.
Good.
Instead, the British government, supported every step of the way by Her Majesty, had to settle for dumping endless amounts of taxpayer money into supporting the terrorists and enforcing a blockade on Rhodesia. A year after UDI in 1966, the Commonwealth Conference was the same as always. Smith writes of the Third World leaders, which Her Majesty had enthralled her country to. Quote, Conda was incensed at the cutting down of British financial aid and
Oh, what? There's Trinidad and Tobago. Fun fact about them. There was a judge that was born in Trinidad and Tobago, somehow became a judge here in the United States, ruled against Trump recently about deporting like 600 illegal immigrants or to El Salvador or something like that. Once again, a judge from fucking Trinidad and Tobago was born there, a third world country, brown obviously, and a woman, somehow became a judge in America, even though she's not actually American herself. Ruled against Trump about mass deportations. Make this shit up. Tobago? Tobago. Tobago? That's how you're supposed to pronounce it? Really? Tobago. I'm not gonna remember that. It's spelled Tobago. I appreciate it, but I ain't gonna remember it. Tobago is how we pronounce it here. Well, I believe it was originally one of the British colonies, so I'm assuming it's supposed to be Tobago technically. Tobago, sorry, Tobago. Is that how you properly pronounce it? Because it was originally their place. But it's still gonna be Tobago, by the way.
typical manner, resulted a hurling abuse and insult at Wilson, in which he was joined by a number of other black Commonwealth leaders in demanding a military solution in view of the fact that sanctions had proved to be a failure. The Prime Minister's conference duly took place, and as usual, was accompanied by much verbosity and many threats. The final communique of the 14th of September bore the taint of the new modern Commonwealth, in place of the traditional, reasoned, balanced,
Many threats. Many threats. So the Queen invited these third world countries into the Commonwealth, which was stupid. They come in and they just threaten the fuck out of her and Britain, and she still allows it to happen. Just kick them the fuck out. They don't belong there. That makes her so fucking mad. That makes her so fucking mad. Ugh! Oliver Cromwell, Britain fixed itself. Oliver Cromwell unfixed it. It's a long story, but he made an unholy alliance and kept the people, and allowed people of Baal to install the bug monarchy. I have to relearn about the story of Oliver Cromwell. Because I've heard good and bad things about him. I know in history he's considered terrible because he like usurped the king and queen, and then he was a dictator, and then people hated him, and so then they brought back the monarchy by importing them from the Dutch, I believe. But I have to relearn the history and see if I actually agree with him or not. He was a traitor, the traitor to end all traitors. Interesting. He banned Christmas. Okay, fuck him. I don't like Oliver Cromwell. That's all I need to know. You ban Christmas, I kill you. Simple as that.
the mature wisdom associated with such associations in former days, it was now split into two clear-cut divisions. On one side, unfortunately consisting of the majority, with the failures, the have-nots, who resorted to the traditional of blaming everyone else for their deficiencies. On the other side, unfortunately the minority, with a responsible representative of those countries, which had proved themselves to be truly independent and could stand on their own feet, the success stories. The first category were destructive, with their false accusations and threats, the other, constructive, with their efforts directed at cooperation and assisting one another to improve standards of life. The failures resulted to the parrot cry that they were in the current predicament because they were exploited by the colonial powers. But Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Rhodesia had gone through the same history. And as a matter of interest, so did USA and South Africa, and they are all glorious success stories. Those who have not made the grade must stop looking for a scapegoat and look to themselves. Their corruption, incompetence, nepotism, external bank accounts, and high leisure preference. The fault, dear Brutus, lies not in our stars, but in ourselves. End quote. The Queen's behaviour did not improve with time. Smith went on, quote, It had, however, become increasingly difficult for us to separate monarch and empire from the deviousness of the politicians. Wilson went so far, later, as to drag the Queen into his machinations by getting her to include in a speech at the Jamaica Commonwealth Conference in April 1975 some provocative remarks about Rhodesia, which were a distortion of the truth. This caused a large number of our older generation of loyal citizens to become extremely angry, tearing up their pictures of the royal family and pulling down their Union Jacks. Some remarked that if only her father or grandfather had been alive, Wilson would have been put in his place. End quote. Queen Elizabeth was so petty that she
Based. The more I learn about the queen, the more I dislike her. Honestly. Like, the sweet little old lady that wouldn't harm a fly for the past 20 years of propaganda I've been indoctrinated with, and the tea and the crumpets and the Big Ben and stuff like that. No, no, fuck her. Fuck her. To destroy your country like this. Granted, like I said, even if it wasn't just her, I'm based off the time period and what else was happening across the Western world, it would have, even if it was a man, it probably would have been similar just because of the forces at hand. But wouldn't be surprised if a lot of how extreme this was is because she's a woman and fuck that shit.
demanded that the Rhodesian government remove the word royal from the Royal Rhodesia Regiment and the Royal Rhodesian Air Force. Obviously, by this point, though, the Rhodesians couldn't care less, and were happy to be rid of any attachment to the royal family. My fellow Rhodesia enthusiast Will Tanner also quote tweeted the original tweet, and he sums the Queen's approach to her own kith and kin up rather well. Quote, as documented in So Far and No Further, Rhodesia's bid for independence during the retreat from empire, 1959 to 1965, Elizabeth I was integral in pushing Rhodesia's destruction. She encouraged it in every way she could, did her best to snub and isolate Ian Smith, and in 1980 sent then Prince Charles to lend Mugabe the legitimacy and support of the crown as he began his reign of terror. That aligned with her time as a royal generally, as she never once lifted a finger or spoke a word to protect the empire and British people, instead being more than willing to work with the Labour governments to put a cheery face on the destruction of the country. Yeah, the royals have limited power, so there's little she could have directly done, but they had immense prestige before she and Charles squandered it.
Yeah, but like he's already said within this video that she already intervened and helped save those savages that try to kill that man. Oh well, who did kill that man and his family before, and she already intervened with a lot of the peace talks and everything like that. So like she clearly had a decent amount of power even then. Yeah, no, fuck that shit, fuck that.
And that could have been used to defend British civilization from post war tyranny and insanity, and she could have used her remaining political power to aid in that project. Instead, she ignored her duty entirely and let the country go from ruling a quarter of the globe to barely being a backwater full of Muslims. End quote. In 1980, when Mugabe won the Rhodesian election by brutalizing his own people openly to vote for him, whilst the British police who had been brought in to oversee the situation simply watched on and did nothing, the Queen decided to send him a message of congratulations and, as Will states, sent her son to legitimize him. Mugabe's men, at his command, had slaughtered hundreds of British women and children. Despite all this, the Queen threw her full weight behind him. Her behaviour was quite the same in Kenya. The Africans there massacred the whites, her very own people, but the Queen gave the new regime her full support, met with them.
I mean, that one story that Zoomer already went over, the guy being stabbed and gasoline thrown on his car on the car is pretty bad. But there's other horror stories that I've heard of what the blacks have done in like Rhodesia and South Africa and all these other countries, and the mass genocide that has occurred under the Queen's approval, not just her ignorance, her approval like this. Not even just abandoned. She's just saying she fully sanctioned it. She's just fully sanctioned it. Yes, mass murder my people. Let me celebrate with you and laugh as everyone dies in fires. But it's not related to me as I'm in my beautiful castle. You know, thousands upon thousands of miles away in a whole different country. Just kill them all. It's not my problem anymore.
And legitimized them. So yes, Elizabeth was atrocious abroad, but how about at home? Was she any better here? The answer is a resounding no. From the very moment the third world immigrants arrived in Britain, they began to terrorize the local population.
Of
In the
course.
1950s, there were already grooming gangs across the north of England, which saw young white girls subjected to the most horrifying tortures imaginable. This horror continued to spread. During Elizabeth's reign, the case of minority on white crime only grew and grew. The nation's rape rate, murder rate, and theft rate all increased, and every other kind of crime skyrocketed. Those who spoke up against these horrors were shut down and terrorized by the state. Not once did she lift a finger to protect her own people. The typical response to such a comment is to say that she is merely a figurehead. There is nothing she could say or do. Many claim that she was on our side the entire time, but just couldn't speak up because it would be improper, or because it would bring about a crisis with the monarchy, or some such other nonsense. The reality is that regardless of her actual de facto role, Her Majesty had the heart of the nation, and was by far the most prestigious individual in the country. If she had cared or spoken up, it would have changed absolutely everything. The claim that she couldn't speak up, as it would be improper, is perhaps the most laughable line of all, because she actually, on several occasions, came right out and spoke out in favor of the invasion of the United Kingdom by Third World immigrants and the replacement of the native population. The most egregious example by far is her 2004 Christmas message, which was subversive beyond belief. She began by stressing that Christmas is not just a break from work, but an important Christian religious festival. A wholesome start. You would expect that the rest of the message would be about Jesus Christ and the real meaning of Christmas. Instead, she immediately jumps right into trying to shove diversity down the public's throat, a complete justification of the presence of invaders in the United Kingdom, and a continuation of the invasion itself. She says, quote, "For me as a Christian, one of the most important of these teachings is contained in the parable of the Good Samaritan, when Jesus answers the question, 'Who is my neighbor?' End quote." She then goes on a long speech, beginning with how, quote, "The implication drawn by Jesus is clear. Everyone is our neighbor, no matter what race or color," end quote. One might think she means in general, as in globally, everyone is our neighbor, and we must treat them with respect, but that is far from what she meant, and she goes on to make that very clear. Her Majesty lectures us that we ought to respect others' backgrounds and urges everyone to cooperate. The mask then slips, and she finishes the speech in the following fashion, quote, "There is certainly much more to be done, and many challenges to be overcome. Discrimination still exists. Some people feel that their own beliefs are being threatened. Some are unhappy about unfamiliar cultures. They all need to be reassured that there is so much to be gained by reaching out to others, that diversity is indeed a strength and not a threat. We need also to realize that peaceful and steady progress in our society of differing cultures and heritage can be threatened at any moment by the actions of extremists at home or by events abroad. We can certainly never be complacent, but there is every reason to be hopeful about the future. I certainly recognize that much has been achieved in my lifetime. I believe tolerance and fair play remain strong British values, and we have so much to build on for the future. It was for this reason that I particularly enjoyed a story I heard the other day about an overseas visitor to Britain who said the best.
Okay, I was gonna let him finish her speech, but no, no, no. Diversity is our strength, and let's not be hurt by extremists here. You know what? I don't care. I don't care. I might not be British myself, so but I don't really care once again. Mene fuego, my motherfuckers, because I don't care. Mene fuego, I do not care. Cause holy shit, diversity is not our strength. I am not sacrificing my country to be ravaged by these disgusting freaks that we keep on importing in at ridiculously fucking numbers to no end at sight at this point in time. I will not allow this to happen under my fucking watch. No fucking way. No sir way. Men no fuego. I do not care. I do not fucking care. Ooh. Oh my god. This happened in 2004. I know the Tony Blair shit was in 1997, and this was happening even before Tony Blair. He just turned up the dial to the extremes. And so this was happening basically when I was a toddler, right? Within Britain. Once again, not British myself, Amerikanski. Suck my dick. And it's just like, okay, so this has been happening for almost as long as I've been alive now. And it's only gotten so much fucking worse. The Boris wave has made it so much fucking worse. It's just another day that ends in Y that a British girl gets raped. Or a European girl gets raped. Or a black murders somebody or steals something. Whatever the case is. How long do we have to live like this? Because I'm not tolerating this any longer. I have been tolerating this for years, but how long how much longer do we have to live like this before we vote our way out of things? Because I'm tired. I am very tired, and I do not care anymore. I will show them that diversity is our strength. How about that? I'll show them diversity is our strength. How? It bands the people together, the true people of the nation, to rise up against it. We have few more years to go of voting our way out of things to make things happen. It has to fucking happen. White people are 6% of the global population, and it's only getting worse as the birth rates plummet. Mixed race is promoted like a crazy, and people are getting raped and murdered every fucking day. Oh, the wish. Oh, the things I would say. Oh, the places I would see, the places to go, and the things I would say. But it's because of how bad the dating scene is with specifically white women thanks to feminism and how fat women are getting in general. A lot of men are turning to the Asians as it, which is not good, by the way. It's a little bit more understandable and at the same time frustrating for men because one hand, they're what propagandizes is free choice. On the other hand, I also can't blame them for it either. But still bad. Don't do it.
The best part of his visit had been travelling from Heathrow into central London on the tube. His British friends were, as you can imagine, somewhat surprised, particularly as the visitor had been to some of the great attractions of the country. What do they mean? They asked. Because, he replied, I boarded the train just as the schools were coming out. At each stop, children were getting on and off. They were of every ethnic and religious background, some with scarves or turbans, some talking quietly, others playing and occasionally misbehaving together, completely at ease and trusting one another. How lucky you are, said the visitor, to live in a country where your children can grow up this way. I hope they will be allowed to enjoy this happy companionship for the rest of their lives. A happy Christmas to you all, end quote. If King Charles had uttered such subversive nonsense,
I hope they can live in this wonderful way for the rest of their lives. Yeah, well, 20 fucking years later, and all the white girls are getting raped and murdered. How's that working out for them?
then the British people, as with everything else he says, would be absolutely up in arms. Her statement reads as nothing else but, don't worry about those millions of foreign invaders pouring into your country with their foreign customs. Don't worry about the disappearance of your own people and your own culture before your very eyes. Somehow, I promise you, the arrival of untold millions of third world invaders will not threaten you in any way. Clips play in the background whilst this speech goes on, in which she meets with third world invaders, and they tell Her Majesty their professions, usually some ridiculous anti-white nonsense. One woman says she does a lot of work around diversity in the workplace. That is, getting rid of white British workers and replacing them with new arrivals. The Queen responds to this particular woman saying, quote, wonderful work to be doing, end quote. Not one, but several of the Muslims she meets tell Her Majesty about how fast they are expanding. She has no objections at all. Others speak to Prince Charles, now King Charles, of how they're spreading Islam to a new breed of Islam. Again, no objections, and the clip was included in the Christmas message. The video ends with a clip of children singing from a school, in which the white children have been almost completely ethnically replaced. The camera pans from minority to minority, subversively pushing diversity in your face, whilst the children sing a wholesome Christmas song. The darker reality, of course, is that the British people had been ethnically cleansed from this area and have had to relocate elsewhere for their own safety. That's why the school now looks the way it does. This is not a wholesome example of working together and diversity, but rather a hostile occupation. Queen Elizabeth, again and again, served as a respectable face which was slapped on the most vile agenda possible, that being the ethnic replacement of the British population. As the Queen, it is her job above all others to call out such a historic tragedy. Instead, she went along with it, promoted it, and rubber-stamped it every step of the way. 2 years beforehand, in 2002, at her Golden Jubilee, she addressed Parliament and praised the British people as a, quote, moderate, pragmatic people, outward-looking and open-minded, end quote, and went on, quote, we are inventive and creative. Think of the record of British inventions over the past 50 years, or our present thriving art scene. We also take pride in our tradition of fairness and tolerance, the consolidation of our richly multicultural and multi-faith society. A major
I can guarantee you, and Zoomer will probably point this out, I can guarantee you any inventions that were created in the British Isles in the 50 years that she's referring to was 100% by the white British that still remained. Not by anything that's multicultural. Maybe one, maybe two in conjunction with somebody that's also white and actual British. But it's not because of diversity. You were a great, amazing empire before diversity. And then to give your own accomplishments up for the sake of the Browns is just so suicidal. It's not even funny. I do love how this graph shows because it was in the 50s and 60s that the Commonwealth was expanded, to say the least. But look how as soon as it gets expands, it just rises like fucking crazy. And then Let's see, Tony Blair's stuff was in 1997, which would be basically right here. And then that's when he does this whole massive wave and importing even more people in and just fucking spikes back up. Surprised it actually goes down a little bit, but still, look how high that is. Look at how high that is. Even at the lowest peak within the 50-year time period that this is showing from right here, that's still higher than it ever did even before the multicultural importation is. Like that's just absolutely fucking ridiculous. The closest is a little peak right here, which I'm not exactly sure what this peak is, to be honest, in this time frame. Looks like it's in the 40s of some sort. But still the lowest peak in this massive jump is still higher than the highest peak before the multicultural stuff. It looks roughly the same. It's wait, hold on. It's kind of hard because I'm trying to use my mouse to like slide over enough. It's still lower, not by much, but it's still lower.
Development since 1952 is being achieved remarkably peacefully and with much goodwill, end quote. Again, the establishment of a multicultural and multi-faith society as a kind of project is simply the ethnic replacement of the British people.
I have this in my statistics folder, lost somewhere because of how big that thing's growing. That just terrifies me. How could like there's this all this propaganda going on in Britain right now, and also America and the Western world in general. This is about the British, about how Britain's always been like a multicultural society, and what diversity is our strength. What we do without our browns, and this is perfect proof that it's always been majority white and British. This is from 1961, so there already was some importations of browns just from the empire and also the work that Elizabeth was doing. But still, let's see, 92, 90% in Brent, 90%. I don't think Westminster really counts since that's where where the politicians are. So, but basically, the average in the London is 94%. Oh, so it's just London in general, basically. So this is just London. London, not the rest of the country, just London in general and the different suburbs of it essentially. London is still 94.5% majority white in the 60s. And that's supposed to be the main hub, the capital. Apparently, where all the foreigners would come in because it is the main state. And so I can guarantee the rest of the country is higher than that, even from the 60s. And now it's at 38.6%. That's in 2021, and I know the number is even lower all these years later. That's of course if they're accurate. Then we got Brent, which was one of the lowest ones. It's at 17, well, I guess 18% if you were to round up. Or Haringey, 34%. We are being genocided in real fucking time. And anyone who tells you otherwise is a liar, doesn't know the truth, or both just malicious.
People with new third world immigrants. Large swathes of the country had been dominated by foreigners. London itself, by that point, had seen half of its British population dispersed to the surrounding counties. There was no peace. There was no goodwill. These British people had to flee precisely because they were being subjected to a hostile invasion in which their children, especially their daughters, were targeted by the invaders. She had no problem cheering on the replacement of her own religion. To remember, the Queen was the head of the Church of England. In 2012, she said her role as the head of the Anglican Church, quote, "Its role is not to defend Anglicanism to the exclusion of other religions. The Church has a duty to protect the free practice of all faiths in this country," end quote. Anglican church attendance by the time of Queen Elizabeth's death was around 1% of the population or less. Horrifying drop from what she had inherited in the 1950s. This video, as noted at the beginning, is merely an overview of Queen Elizabeth.
I mean, I'm kind of biased because I was raised Catholic and I kind of see the Anglican Church as like a joke. No offense to any Anglicans out there, 1% within the British Isles that you are. It's just like still you're supposed to be the head of it once again and they just don't care. Who am I supposed to discriminate against other religions? Because you're the leader of that religion, you dumb fucking bitch. God, I hate it so much.
By no means a full history of every contribution to our decline, or her life in general. I hope, however, this will give you a more reasonable picture of who the late Queen actually was. Her son is lambasted for cheering on our ethnic replacement, but she was no different. Away from home, she actively cheered on the genocide of our own people. Charles certainly cannot say the same just yet. It's easy to look back at the propaganda view of the late Queen and to think how good things were, but it's simply not reality. To those on the British right praising her, I say think again.
I can only think the reason why anybody on the British right would actually still support the Queen was because they don't know about this stuff, and they still see her as that sweet little old lady that would never harm a fly. That's the only thing I can think of with this, because just to do that to your own people is just insane, absolute insanity. My anger just my anger makes it really hard to speak because I don't know even what to say. And at the same time, what I do want to say, I can't even say because I'm on YouTube. And so it just renders me silent just how angry I get. As I just... It's so sad and depressing. And I don't mean to like end the night stream on like a black pill like this. I just hope I hope this really just helps invigorate people to focusing on reversing this. Because this was done against everyone's will. Nobody wanted this. Everyone's been voting against immigration for decades now. Both within the British and Americans and all the rest of the Western countries as well. Nobody wants this to happen. And only we can stop this. We just gotta vote our way out of it. Okay, I can't do this anymore. I'm getting angry. I'm not even making complete sentences. Anyways, so the least you can do for Zoomer is to give this a watch. It's a 30-minute video, so I don't know, have the first 5 minutes on in the background at the bare minimum. Or rewatch it again yourself. Give it a like. Leave a comment. Something to help him out, because he did great work with this. He's one of the few people actually not acknowledging what has happened in the past and the sins that Queen Elizabeth has done. I mean, for fuck's sake, he's making it into a YouTube video too, so even more people can see. So it's the least you can do to at least drop a like, watch a few minutes in it, maybe leave a comment, whatever the case is, to give him the algorithmic push, because he deserves this. Top right base, like the top right vid, you just want to see the titties, which I don't blame you for. But I mean, I have titties. I have titties. I know they're my titties, but I have titties. Please, I'm the woman who wants attention. I'm the woman who wants attention and male validation. No. Therefore, I'm gonna call her an ugly cow and we're gonna ignore her. What a fucking cunt. Look at her massive jugs. Isn't she such a whore? Right? Isn't she such a whore, Miss Queen Elizabeth? Oh my god. We want new ones, sorry. Ah! Fuck you guys. Fuck you guys. You suck. That's why we're gonna talk about Queen Elizabeth instead. What the fuck say? What the fuck say?